Good morning, Academy. Welcome, and thank you for tuning in. My name is Sean Magner, and I am a Baltimore, Maryland-based hard money lender and private buy and hold investor, and also real estate investing coach. So I'm going to be looking over to my side here. I've got some notes because I've got a pretty important topic I want to cover today, and I don't want to miss any of the points that I've jotted down. If I keep looking over, that's the reason why. The agenda, what I want to talk about today is called It's Never Too Late to Redefine Yourself, to embrace change and not fear it. I am personally on the threshold of making some really big changes inside of my business. What's up, Dominic? I'm on the threshold of making some big changes in my business, and I'm feeling all sorts of ways about it, right? It's got me feeling lots of different things. And so I might be selling all of my properties, and I'll get into that in a bit. But before I do, let me start with a story of change, and starting back from my childhood, and also some milestones from my timeline along the way. So some highlights, and I'm going to tie it all together at the end here, so stay with me, but I'll try to keep it short and not bore you. But I was a military brat. What's up, Chad? Ross? I was a military brat, and so we moved around a lot as a kid. So there was not a lot of stability. We landed in Memphis, Tennessee when I was 7 years old, and I didn't really have many friends. And as such, I was a pretty easy target for bullies. And I was bullied quite a bit as a kid. And it lasted a few years. It got violent at times, but I was young. It was kind of what you did, I guess, in the 90s. But my dad, he was out of the military at this point, and he retired in 90. We moved to Tennessee. And he chose to work with a company called Kellogg's, a cereal maker. I'm sure you're familiar. And we took a relocation in 1996. I was 13. I turned 13 that summer. And we moved to Pennsylvania. And I started in a new school in 8th grade, which is a difficult age to just start over and to forge new friendships. But as soon as I got there, the bullying started right away, right? I got picked on by a guy who was bigger than most in our grade. And I decided, you know what? No, not anymore. So I got bullied, and I decided this time I was going to push back. So I pushed back, and he was surprised. The rest of the class was surprised. Everyone thought I was surely a dead man. And I probably should have been, but I decided, Sean, that summer I decided, dude, you've got an opportunity to redefine yourself, to change, to make a new, story for yourself. And so I decided I'm not going to take it like I did before. And so I was bullied, and this guy named, I won't leave any names, but he pushed me in a locker bank. I fell, I got up, I pushed him back, and everyone thought I was going to die. Well, the very next day, this bully asked me if I would walk home with him, if I had an interest in walking home with him after school. And I thought, well, I've got one of two options here, or one of two outcomes here. I'm going to say yes, and I'm going to either die, he's going to kill me, or I'm going to say yes because he respected me. Turns out, for the next 2 or 3 years, we became inseparable. We were best friends. I don't think he'd been stood up to that way. I don't think I knew any better, else I might not have done what I did. But by making that drastic change and deciding to make that drastic change, I created a brand new friendship, one that lasted beautifully for a few years. But then, I'm looking back at my notes here. Fast forward a few years, now I'm 15 years old, and my parents split up, and my mom moves away. And that's a different story, but it was another big change. It added a ton of responsibility. My father and I have always been tight. We still are tight. But at that point, that change was a big deal. And that best friend that I mentioned, that bully best friend who became a best friend, he decided to take a less responsible path. So now I decided on another change. And that new change was I'm going to forge all new friends, an entire new friend group at about 16, 17 at this point. And I did that. That was another big change. Now, fast forward a couple more years, and all my friends take off for college. Everyone's leaving for college, and I didn't have a plan to do that. So I had to make another big decision. What am I going to do? And I heard there was, money to be made in the building trades. So I started swinging hammers and pushing brooms around job sites and wheelbarrows around job sites. Learned that I liked the trade, so I decided to get a formal education. So I went to a trade school. A few years later, I took a bet on myself and got out of construction and into sales. Right? I got into sales, building material sales, and I did that for a few years. A few years later, I again was faced with change. I wanted more, so I decided to take a bet on myself yet again. Got into sales leadership, sales management, sales leadership. And, I started a few businesses throughout my 20s that failed. I'm telling you all this to speak to, not just bore you with my story, because I could go way deeper and there's a lot more to it, but there's change at every single one of these. And I'm going to get to the end here and explain the outcome. So I started a few businesses that all failed in my 20s. I moved to Baltimore from Pennsylvania at 30, not knowing anybody here. I took a big bet on myself, went through some life changes, and decided I needed to shake some stuff up. So I moved to Baltimore, not knowing anyone. That was a huge risk, a huge change. One of the best that I've ever made. A few years later, I left the workforce to invest full time. I started investing while I was down here. I won't get into that right now, but I left the workforce a few years later to invest full time. Again, a major change. And then a few months after I started, I met a mentor. If you tuned in last week to last week's live stream, you heard me talk about some mentors. Well, I met a mentor down here that introduced me to the BRRRR strategy. That's a rental property acquisition strategy a lot of people use to build portfolios. And so he introduced me to this before I even heard of the acronym. He introduced me to this concept. And I had a mentor in him, and he taught me how to buy rental property sooner than I ever thought I could. And that was powerful, of course. I then began traveling around the country, speaking for and coaching for, at the time, the nation's largest real estate investment education company. Again, taking bets on myself and making changes. I later met another mentor who taught me the hard money lending business, which is my primary focus these days, if you see my shirt. All along the way, I was an avid reader. I still am an avid reader. Some of these books you see back here, the other room over there is full of them. I've given a lot of books away. But I've always been an avid reader for years. I still am. But I sought mentorship in those authors and in people that I met in person along the way that inspired me. You probably heard some of this before. Some people motivate you, some people inspire you, other people you aspire to be. And I've been fortunate enough to meet a few of the former or the latter, and they've changed my life in many ways. And so some of those authors, I won't get into too many. If you have an interest and you want to learn who some of those authors are and some of the books that that really changed it for me and were basically paradigm shifts along the way, please let me know in the comments. I'll be sure to respond, or reach out to me directly. I can hook you up. But guys like Robert Kiyosaki, I'm sure you've heard of him. Rich Dad, Poor Dad, right here. Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. That's back here as well. Big books. I keep them back here as a reminder. I can go on and on. Michael Gerber, Napoleon Hill, Tony Robbins, and on. But these relationships with these authors, these fake relationships, and the ones that I met in person, the actual people that I knew, these mentors, they gave me the courage to continue betting on myself. And I recently read, and I shared this last week. If you follow me, you would have seen it. I follow a private equity operator named Cody Sanchez, and she shared this thing that says, nothing's more freeing than being able to say no to anyone at any time. Leaving your comfort zone and embracing change will set you free in that way. And so I've got a couple of takeaways that I want to speak to that kind of come to tie back to what we just talked about. Some of the results from all these changes. Lifestyle by design, LBD. You've probably heard that before. You can grab a sip here. Without embracing change, I wouldn't have built the businesses that I've built, impacted the people that I've been able to impact, and experienced the richness of the world outside of my comfort zone, right? That's huge. I'm sure you've heard that before. Life starts outside of your comfort zone, all those cliches. I love cliches. Ultimately, I wouldn't be living the rich life I enjoy today. And I don't mean just monetarily, right? I mean in experiences and in joy. A few years ago, we were able to move to the suburbs into a school, one of the top school districts in the country, because I wanted that stability for my family that I didn't have when I was young. And so we've been able to do that. I say this, if you're nervous or anxious about making a change, embrace it. Sure, ask yourself what's the worst that could happen, but don't forget to ask yourself what's the best that could happen. That's a huge deal. As an investor, we're quick to, if you're a smart investor, you're quick to pay attention to the upside potential, but you've got to look at the downside risk first. That's what's most important, right? We know that. If you've been doing this long enough, you've probably experienced that. And so anyhow, I've never been afraid of change. I've always leaned into it. But the reason I've been able to do that is because I've had people, mentors, having my back all along the way. Mentorship continued providing the confidence to embrace and pursue the evolution of the change, right? That's a big deal for me. I surround myself, I've got mentors, and at the gym, I have a trainer. He's a mentor. He's an accountability partner, a mentor. What's up, Scott? Daniel, Gary, Alan, what's up, buddy? I've got accountability partners and mentors across all parts of my life, not just professionally. But, I say all this to say to the big change that I'm talking about today that brought me here to this topic is that I have been looking at recently I've been spending a lot of time looking at my portfolio of businesses, right? So I run what's called Monument City Group, which is a collective of boutique real estate investing businesses here in Baltimore. Monument City Capital is the primary focus of my time and my attention, which is my hard money lending business, and Property Investing Academy, which is my coaching and consulting mentorship program. But I also own a few dozen rental properties, single family buy and hold rental properties, long-term and short-term. And I've really been doing a lot of analysis of the portfolio recently. And I know the equity that I have in there. It's a few seven figures. And what I could do with that. And I take the equity that's sitting there, compare the cash flow I'm getting from it, the stress that comes from it, the business systems that are required to run it. And I compare that to what I could do with that business, to what I could do with the capital if I were to sell everything and park that money in my lending business. And I got to tell you, I would make more money lending the equity that I have than experiencing the cash flow. Sure, the savvy investor that's listening is going to say, but Sean, you're going to lose your tax drag. You're going to lose your the real reason to become a real estate investor, right? Wholesaling and flipping is ordinary income. It's taxed as such. Buy and hold gives you all the shelter that you seek in real estate, right? It gives you the appreciation, ACE, appreciation, cash flow, equity. And so I realized that by doing that, I would give up and lose some tax drag, the tax benefits. I fully acknowledge that and I recognize that. And that's a real consideration. But I also consider having a young family and thinking, do I want to own this portfolio that I currently do that is so full of stress and headaches? My assistant manages it, so I shouldn't say that it's that stressful for me anymore. But there's that portfolio. If I sold everything and took the capital, lent it for a few years, yes, I would cut Uncle Sam some big old checks. That's been the big benefit of the last decade. I've not had to. I've experienced income at tax time. It's always nice. So I'd be shifting and actually cutting checks to Uncle Sam at tax time, and that would be a bit of a change. But do that for a few years. I would make more money with less stress, more streamlined, and then eventually start buying different assets in a few years, different asset classes, and whether it's inside of real estate or not. So anyhow, I guess I'm using this live stream opportunity as a little bit of therapy. And bouncing this, hearing myself say it out loud is helping me to get to the decision. But I'm on the threshold of making a really big decision here because I identify as a real estate operator. I have for a decade now. And by selling everything, I would no longer be a real estate operator, right? I would be offering service businesses to the real estate community, private lending and coaching. Okay. I'm just struggling with that identity change. And so that's why I chose this topic today. And I started boring you probably with the story of all the changes along the way. But to tie it all together, all of those changes along the way have led me to where I am, and I love where I am, and I'm proud of where I am. And so I know that making those tough decisions is what got me here. So I'm on the threshold of making this new tough decision. I'm excited about it. My dad's always said, Sean, you're going to make the right decision. You always do. And he often says also that I make the right decision look easy. But the reason it's easy is because I pore over it for a long time. And I consider every person involved and how it's going to affect them. And again, as an investor first, I look at the downside risk before the upside potential. And so anyhow, I share this with you just to say, you know what? I know what I'm probably going to do. I'm leaning in the direction of, especially if interest rates drop. Anyhow. And so I think that betting on myself all along the way has proven to work. But I've not been able to bet on myself confidently without leaning on coaches or mentors along the way, people to help me make those decisions with confidence and be sounding boards and to provide perspective. And so anyhow, and then to add on, one last thing I'll add in here is I had a conversation this week with a lender friend of mine, another buddy who started his business around the same time as me, and his lending business, that is. And we're considering making some sort of a merger or a partnership of sorts in a way. And that's got me very excited. Again, it's change. It's a big change. But I mentioned it earlier. I'm going to scroll up in my notes and try to find this thing that you've heard the sayings about your comfort zone, right? Life begins outside of your comfort zone. But these embracing change, I wouldn't have been able to build the businesses I've built, impacted the people I've impacted, experienced the richest of the world outside of my comfort zone that I have. I've got to make changes, and it's nerve-wracking. And I'm sure if you are on the threshold of making big changes, small changes, anything that makes you feel uncomfortable, I would encourage you to just take a bet on yourself. If you're nervous or anxious about making a change, again, consider what the worst that could happen, but don't forget to remind yourself of the best that could happen. It's awesome. I mean, as an entrepreneur and in the year 2024, change is inevitable. It's an election year. The world around us is changing, and fast, quickly, in all sorts of ways, socially, politically, and on and on. I won't go there. But also, as an entrepreneur, we have to embrace change, right? We've got to take bets on ourselves constantly. So anyhow, listen, I encourage you, if you have a chance, if you're watching this live, great. If you're watching this later, maybe drop a comment. If you've got a takeaway or a change that you're struggling with, man, I'd love to hear it. I really would, because this conversation helps me. It helps you, I hope, to know that you're not alone. We're all dealing with this, and it's never comfortable. It's never easy. And options are wonderful. I could stay the course and be just fine. But that's not who I am. I don't think that's who you are either. So, if... yeah, I'll tell you, if any of this resonates, drop a comment below if you would. Reach out to me directly. If you want to continue a conversation, I'll drop my Calendly link below so that you can have access to me. I'd love to jump on here. I spend a lot of time in my office on Zoom calls. Zoom's a great thing, but I spend a lot of my time on video calls with folks, whether they're coaching clients, lender clients, borrower clients, capital investors that invest in my businesses, other real estate professionals. I spend a lot of time in here. So if any of this resonates with you and you'd like to continue the conversation, please do. And again, if you have a takeaway, I'd love to hear it. So that's it, guys. I wanted to jump in today again just to share some big changes that I'm facing, some things that I'm considering, the angles I'm looking at it from, and I'd love your feedback on that too. Do I sell everything and just put it in lending and make more money with less stress and streamline my businesses, doing less with more, a little bit of an addition by subtraction type of math? Do I stay the course and buy more? I'd love to hear your opinion. I kind of know what I'm going to do, and I know what the direction I want to go. Only I can answer those questions for myself, of course, I know that. But I'd love to hear your feedback. So anyhow, with that, everyone, listen, thank you so much for tuning in. Those that are live, if you're watching the replay, comment below if you can on takeaways that you experienced. Thank you for sticking out here to the end. And that's all I've got for you. Enjoy the rest of your day. Have a great week and weekend, and we'll see you again next week. Cheers, y'all.